If you're watching this video right now, there are two possibilities. Either you chose to click here, or something greater than you brought you to this moment. And before you decide which of those two options is true, you need to hear what comes next. Because what's going to be said here wasn't made for everyone. It was made for a specific group of people. And there's a real chance you're one of them. Most people spend their entire lives thinking that faith is about asking and receiving, that being chosen by God means having an easier life, more protected, more blessed from a material standpoint. But there's a spiritual truth that very few people ever come to know, and when it's revealed, it completely changes the way you see everything you've ever lived through. Your pain, your losses, the cycles that never closed. None of that was an accident. Some people will watch this video and feel nothing. They'll find it interesting, maybe even beautiful, and move on. But there's a small, very specific group that will hear every word here and feel something they can't explain, a kind of recognition, as if the heart knows something the mind is still trying to process. If you're part of that group, you'll know, not because someone will tell you, but because something inside you is already responding right now. Before we continue, do one thing right now. Leave a comment below about what you've been carrying alone lately. That thing you never told anyone. That weight that stayed just between you and God. It doesn't have to be long. It can be a word, it can be a sentence, but write it. Because something powerful happens when a chosen one stops hiding what they carry and starts declaring it out loud. And you'll be surprised to realize you're not alone in this. Drop a like now and subscribe to the channel, because whoever got this far feeling what they're feeling needs to keep receiving what comes next. The title of this video is not a metaphor. It's not clickbait. It's a statement. And in the next few minutes, you yourself will decide whether it's true for your life. Prepare your heart, because what comes next resonates deep within those who were truly set apart for a greater purpose. Some people wake up in the middle of the night without knowing why. No nightmare, no noise, just a restlessness that has no name. Others feel that strange sensation that something big is about to happen, even when life around them seems completely still. This isn't anxiety, this isn't exaggeration. These are signs of God speaking to those who were set apart even before they understood why they were set apart. There's an enormous difference between those who see coincidences and those who recognize signs of God in the middle of chaos. The one chosen for a divine purpose doesn't need scientific proof to know that that encounter, that message, that verse that appeared at just the right time was not by chance. Spiritual awakening begins exactly like this, with a feeling that logic cannot explain, but the heart recognizes immediately. And there's something few people talk about openly. Carrying a calling from God hurts. It hurts in a way the world doesn't understand, and those around you rarely manage to hold space for. That heaviness in your chest that won't go away, that loneliness in the middle of a crowd, that feeling that you were born for something you still can't quite see clearly, that's not weakness. It's the mark of someone anointed for a mission that is still being revealed. The confusing situations you've been through lately, they are not signs of failure. When everything seems to fall apart at the same time, relationships, plans, certainties, it's because God is dismantling what was built outside of divine purpose to make room for what was reserved for you. Those set apart by God almost always go through a phase where it seems like they've lost everything, but in reality, they are being prepared to receive far more. If you identified with any of these feelings, know that it's not for nothing that you arrived here. Chosen ones rarely come across this kind of message by accident, and if something inside you resonates with what's being said, it might be worth paying attention to what comes next, because what seems like just a feeling may be much more than that. There's a lie the world sells very well, that if you were chosen by God, your life should be easier, that doors should open more readily, that people should understand you better, that the path should be smoother. But those who have truly lived through the process of a calling from God know it's exactly the opposite. The greater the divine purpose, the more intense the preparation process. The weariness you feel is not weakness. The waiting that seems to have no end is not abandonment. The feeling that nothing is moving forward, that you pray, you strive, you believe, and yet heaven seems silent, That is exactly the experience that separates those who were anointed from those who only watch from a distance. It's easy to have faith when everything is working. The inner proof of being chosen appears when you remain standing even without seeing any results. Think of Joseph in the book of Genesis, sold by his own brothers, enslaved, unjustly imprisoned, and yet in each impossible phase, God's presence was with him in a silent and unshakable way. What looked like destruction was, in fact, preparation. What looked like the end was the corridor leading to the throne. No chosen one reaches their divine purpose without first going through the process most people abandon halfway through. And here's the detail that changes everything. Those who give up usually give up one step before the turning point. The deepest spiritual awakening almost always happens in the moment of greatest pressure, when life presses in a way that feels unbearable, when the signs of God seem silenced and faith becomes the only thing left. It's there, exactly there, that the calling of God is being confirmed in the life of the one who was set apart. If you've gotten this far, enduring all of this, the silence, the waiting, the losses that made no sense, it wasn't for nothing. Something is being built beneath what you can see right now, and when that construction is revealed, it will make every difficult phase make sense in a way that today still seems impossible to imagine. What comes next may be exactly the missing piece that helps you understand why you went through all of this. Not every spiritual truth was made to be understood by everyone. This isn't elitism, it's a biblical principle. Jesus himself spoke in parables precisely because certain revelations only make sense to those who have already gone through the process that opens the eyes of the heart. Those who have never felt the weight of a divine purpose, who have never been on their knees without understanding why, simply don't have the inner soil prepared to receive what God reserves for the chosen. There is a layer of spiritual understanding that cannot be learned from a book, cannot be acquired in a course, and cannot be purchased with human intelligence. It comes from the process. It comes from the dark night you walked through without seeing a way out. It comes from the faith you maintained even when everything inside you wanted to give up. The signs of God that seem invisible to most are clear to those who were anointed, precisely because that kind of vision only develops after a certain level of surrender and preparation. That's why when someone who has never lived through this process tries to explain the calling of God, it sounds hollow. It sounds like theory, like a beautiful speech with no substance. But when you hear someone who went through the same things you went through talk about spiritual awakening, about divine separation, about the silence of God before the revelation, something inside you stops, recognizes, not because it was convinced, but because it already knew that from the inside and finally found words to name it. God doesn't hide these truths out of caprice, He preserves them. Like a father who doesn't hand the car keys to a child who hasn't learned to drive yet, not for lack of love, but out of an excess of it. What will be revealed next doesn't make sense to those who have never felt the weight of being set apart by God. But for you, who have come this far carrying everything you've carried, every word ahead will resonate in a place few things have ever managed to reach. And perhaps this is the first time you're hearing this said so directly. The fact that you are here at this exact moment watching this content is not a coincidence. The chosen ones don't stumble onto these messages, they are led to them. Your heart already knows this, and what comes next will confirm what you already feel but hadn't yet been able to put into words.
The 3 signs that you are one of the chosen. The first sign is the one that unsettles most because it has no rational explanation. The persistent feeling that you belong to something far greater than your current life can contain. It's not arrogance, it's not delusions of grandeur. It's a quiet certainty that lives in a place inside you that even you cannot fully access. People who carry a divine purpose live with this feeling, like a longing for a place they haven't arrived at yet, a calling from God that pulses even when the life around them seems completely ordinary. The second sign is the one that hurts the most, but also the one that proves the most. People were removed from your life. Situations collapsed. Relationships that seemed solid simply ceased to exist. And you didn't ask for any of it. In the moment, it felt like loss. It felt like abandonment. But looking back with honesty, you can see that each thing that left opened space for something that needed to come in. The signs of God don't always arrive as visible blessing. Sometimes they arrive as necessary removal, and only those set apart by God can recognize that once the dust settles. And the third sign is the quietest of all, but the most powerful. There is within you a certainty that doesn't depend on external validation. You don't need someone to confirm that your story has purpose. You already know. Even in the darkest days, even when faith trembled and the tears came, there was something deep down that didn't go out, an ember that the wind couldn't kill. This isn't stubbornness. This is the seal of spiritual awakening in someone who was anointed before they even understood what that means. These three signs together form a pattern that isn't common. Most people go through life without feeling any of the three with that intensity. When all three coexist in the same life, the inexplicable sense of belonging, the removals that deep down made sense, and the quiet certainty that never fully went out, that is not chance. That is a signature. It's the way God marks those who are set apart for something that is still being built behind the scenes of the invisible. If you recognized those three signs in your own story, pause for a moment and let that settle. Don't skim over it. Don't minimize it. What you felt throughout your life wasn't exaggeration or imagination. It was real, it was valid, and there was a reason behind each of those experiences. And what comes next will reveal the weight and the responsibility that come with all of this in a way that will change how you see everything you've ever lived through.
There's an enormous difference between being blessed and being set apart. Everyone wants the blessing, the favor, the prosperity, the life that works. But to be seen by God in a special way, to be the one of whom He says, "Show this only to them," that's not just privilege, it's a weight that transforms. It's a responsibility that changes the way you understand every experience you've ever had, every pain you've carried, and every night you walked through without understanding why. The period of silence you lived through wasn't divine abandonment, it was verification. Just as gold only proves its value inside fire, the chosen only reveal what they carry within the processes most people avoid. God wasn't absent during your waiting. He was present in a way that untrained eyes cannot see. Every phase of confusion, every door that closed, every plan that fell apart was part of a preparation process so that you could carry what only the anointed can sustain. Think of it this way. A surgeon doesn't operate with instruments that haven't been sterilized. An architect doesn't build on soil that hasn't been prepared. In the same way, God doesn't hand revelation, divine purpose, and spiritual responsibility to those who haven't yet gone through the process that makes all of it sustainable. What you lived through wasn't punishment, it was preparation. And there's an abyssal difference between the two, even when they look identical from the outside. And here's the point few people dare to say. To be seen by God in this way means your story will impact other stories. Those set apart by God rarely carry a calling just for themselves. The spiritual awakening that happens in the life of a chosen one has an address. There are people who will still be touched through what you are becoming. The silence you lived through was protecting something that, when revealed at the right time, will make sense not just to you, but to those who are still waiting for someone who has already been through what you've been through. The fact that you are here right now, at this exact moment, is God's answer to that question you asked in silence during your hardest days. That question you didn't say out loud, but your heart screamed more than once, is it worth it to keep going? The answer didn't come the way you expected. It came like this, quietly, precisely, in the moment when you were already ready to receive it. And what comes next is the most silent and most powerful sign of all. The moment has come for the sign that no logic can dismantle. It's not a sign that appears in the sky. It's not an audible voice. It's not a visible miracle that everyone around you can witness. It's the most discreet of all, and that's exactly why it's the most powerful. While you're listening to this message, something inside you doesn't question, doesn't analyze, doesn't compare. It simply recognizes. And that silent recognition is God's signature confirming that this message was made to reach you. The chosen don't need to be convinced that they were chosen. That is the fundamental difference between those who truly carry a divine purpose and those who merely wish to carry one. Those who need external proof haven't yet found the internal certainty, but those who were set apart by God carry within them a silent detector that vibrates when it comes into contact with what is true, what is real, what was made specifically for them. You didn't read this far by willpower. You were led here by something greater than any conscious decision you could have made. Think of the story of Samuel in the Old Testament. God called him 3 times before he understood it was God who was speaking, not because Samuel was unprepared, but because the recognition of God's calling happens at the right time. There are people who have heard the voice of divine purpose many times in their lives, in different forms, at different moments, and only now, in this instant, are they understanding that those weren't coincidences, they were callings. And this may be the moment when all of it finally makes sense. And here is what makes this 4th sign different from all the others. It doesn't depend on what you lived through in the past, on how much you suffered, on how long you waited, or on how much you believe you deserve. It depends only on what is happening inside you right now, at this very second. As you read each word, something resonates in a place that goes beyond the mind. It resonates in the soul. The anointed recognize the voice that calls them, not because they've heard it many times, but because it speaks in the language that only the heart of one set apart can understand. If this is your moment of remembrance, and something inside you already knows whether it is or isn't, then the question in the title has already been answered. Not by this video, not by these words, but by that part of you that never went out, that withstood everything, that waited without knowing what it was waiting for. You are one of the chosen, not because this video said so, but because your heart recognized it before you even reached the last line. And now that you've remembered, the question that remains is, what are you going to do with all of this?
You made it to the end, and that already says a lot about who you are. Most people quit halfway, switch videos, let their attention drift, run from what touches something deep. But you stayed, and it wasn't by accident. Everything said here wasn't new information. It was remembrance. It was your heart recognizing truths it had been carrying all along, but that hadn't yet found words to exist in. And now that those words exist, you can no longer pretend you don't know. So the question that remains is this, and be honest with yourself. Are you going to keep carrying all of this as if it were a burden, or are you going to start seeing it for what it really is? A purpose, a preparation, a story that hasn't yet arrived where it was always meant to go. Every pain you walked through, every cycle that never closed, every night that passed without an answer, all of it was building something in you that the world still needs to see. The question isn't whether you were chosen. The question is what you're going to do now that you've remembered. Don't let this message die inside you. Knowledge that doesn't turn into action transforms nothing. So start today, not tomorrow, not when life gets better, not when you feel more ready. Start now. Exactly from where you are. Stop hiding behind your limitations and start acting like someone who knows they were set apart for something greater. Because chosen ones who stand still waiting for the perfect moment miss exactly the moment that was already happening. And you, what are you waiting for to take the next step? What is still keeping you where you are when everything inside you already knows you were born for something greater? Write it in the comments. Engage. Because this isn't just a channel. It's a space for those who were set apart to find others who are in the same process. Every comment you leave, every story you share, strengthens not just you, but everyone watching who hasn't yet had the courage to open up. If this video touched something in you, if it made sense in a way that goes beyond the rational, subscribe to the channel now and hit the bell. Because what was said here is just the beginning. There is much more being prepared for those who made it to this point and recognize their own story in the words of this video. Your process hasn't ended. It's only just beginning. And the next step of your journey may be right there in the next piece of content that's on the way.